Been looking to see who's the best All-Ireland winner of the past 16 seasons. I'm just going to put it up on screen here, the sort of knockout competition we have going. So the most recent quarter-final we had was 2007 Kilkenny against 2005 Cork, and the Kilkenny men romped home with the public vote we had on OurGame.ie. So we're going to go for the second quarter-final today, which is 2013 Clare against 2011 Kilkenny. Now, I think what we have here, lads, is, and I'll start with you, Fintan, is we have a 2011 Kilkenny team that wrested the title back off Tipperary, a Tipperary team that was supposed to sort of take over for 10 years. And then on the flip side, you have Davy Fitzgerald Clare team that in 2013 had apparently changed hurling forevermore. So where do you start out with this matchup?
Yeah, I suppose it's interesting as well with the routes they took. Clare playing double the amount of games that season, so there's obvious kind of credit in the way that they managed to move back from. Well, remember that semi-final? They were really disappointing that day against Cork in Munster, and had to win after extra time against Wexford. They beat a Galway team that had got to the All-Ireland final the year before. Then probably came in a bit under the radar in comparison to Limerick for the semi-final. And then there was the two-game saga that we won't talk about in the final. But yeah, like I think it's like that Kilkenny team. I mean, everyone goes on about the kind of 08 team, but like I think that 2011 was fairly close to the peak of their powers as well. Like you had a couple of guys like Michael Fennelly, Michael Rice. I mean, you think of even as well. Like I suppose they lost the league final that year in May, so whatever question marks were kind of on about them after the All-Ireland final in 2010, they were maybe kind of doubled in, I suppose, the pronouncements that were being made about their future.
Yeah, but that was such nonsense, Fintan. That was such nonsense at the time, because like they lost the league final to Dublin, but I think they had only about 7 of their team available. Like they had so many All-Stars and even a couple of hurlers of the year that had to come back later in the summer, so it was so overblown.
I agree with you on that, but it did feed into the whole sense of that, they were beatable, because for so long they were seen as this kind of invincible side, but then the way they came back, obviously they turned the tables fairly convincingly over Dublin, then the next final, as you said, and they kind of players back. That was, like a Waterford side who probably was in the last year or two of that kind of evolution.
They've been beaten by 7 goals by Tipperary, but to be fair, yeah, having gotten hammered a few years before, that Waterford team gave a fairly good examination of Kilkenny, and remember Milan had an unbelievable game at centre forward as well. So, but definitely that Kilkenny team was very, very strong. Michael, any particular thoughts on that? Well, what are your opening thoughts on this particular matchup?
I suppose you're probably going to add in the caveat at some stage. I'd imagine you will. Liam Sheedy had obviously left Tipperary. Tipperary were, I'm not saying they weren't in disarray in 2011, but they were not the same team as they were in 2010. They still had the residual effect of Eamon O'Shea and Liam Sheedy and Mick Ryan being involved, but they weren't the same team. Obviously, they were brilliant in the Munster final. I don't know whether there was complacency or whatever, but Tip were never really Tip were in that final, but they were never really in it, if you know what I mean.
Hold on, I'll just stop you there. This was Declan Ryan took over this particular season, so it was a full sort of change in management. And I think once Dublin realised in the semi-final that this was Tip, a new version of Tip where it was long ball after long ball, Kilkenny were able to study them and very much plan around that. But other than that, yeah, I understand where you're coming from. Just can we look at that Clare team? So I'm just going to bring them up on screen here. But that Clare team, as you said, Fintan, they didn't start out the season particularly well and got beaten comprehensively enough by Cork. Was it Brian Murphy who did a job on Tony Kelly that first day out?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, he would have kind of followed him. He obviously started out his career as kind of an inside defender, but in that latter team was kind of moving towards a kind of a half backline floating role.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they'd played a few weeks previously, do you remember, in our league relegation playoff. So it was the first of a series of meetings that season.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very much a clash of styles. So a physically athletic Kilkenny team that are able to win their own ball, go long anytime they want, versus a Clare team that an awful lot of fast, dynamic players, small, nippy players. And I think it's such a shame that over the years that we never actually saw these two teams play against each other, because obviously Clare, the one time in the space of a decade that they got to Croke Park in the latter stages of the championship, if you take out 2010 when they played a qualifier there, they just weren't getting to Croke Park. This would have been an actual dream matchup at the time, Michael Verney.
Yeah, it definitely would have been. I mentioned it to you before. Tommy Walsh has talked about. He talked about the Jackie Tier, not openly, but he said to Jackie, and Jackie mentioned in his book. Jackie came up to Jackie and Tommy were chatting the winter of 2013, and Tommy came up to Jackie, and he had a fire in his eyes almost, and he was like, I'll take Kelly, you take Podge Collins, and that was tunnel vision what they had in their head for 2014. It's almost like Clare had kind of ripped up the script, according to some people, and even in Tommy's eyes, obviously. And going into 2014, Clare were the favourites going in. Clare were revolutionising hurling. It was kind of a running game mixed with a sweeper at times. All pace, all youth. Kilkenny were coming to the end if they'd met in 2014. Unfortunately, they never met. And to me, that's what doesn't legitimise, Clare's 2013 win, that the fact that they didn't get back to Croke Park for another 5 years. Kilkenny held up their side of the bargain and were in Croke Park for the semi-finals and finals in 14 and 15 and 16, and Clare were kind of nowhere to be seen. And while it was brilliant at the time, and those matches against Cork were absolutely unbelievable, two of the best games I was ever at, like the longer it goes on, it does seem like, okay, that was a missed opportunity for Cork, because everyone else was beaten along the way, and it was Clare basically took advantage of the opportunity that was in front of them. Haven't been able to produce anything like that since. Whereas if you look at the Kilkenny from 2011 onwards, obviously 1 in 12, 1 in 14, 1 in 15, so they backed it up, whereas Clare haven't. So that definitely would take away from the Clare 2013 win when you're comparing it with Kilkenny in 2011.
But if you're talking to the season themselves, I don't know as much. Sorry, Vincent, jump in there.
Yeah, I was just saying as well, the thing is they developed quite a history, Clare and Kilkenny, especially that Clare team at underage level. I mean, in 2010, Kilkenny beat them in the minor final, and then in 2012 it was the under-21 final, and that was the kickstart of that kind of Clare golden era. And I was just looking at it, I mean, like that Kilkenny team had Walter Walsh, Padraig Walsh, John Power, Kevin Kelly, Jerry Aylward, a good few guys who went on to play senior. And then obviously Clare's team was littered with players who would 12 months later go on to win the All-Ireland. So it seemed that Kilkenny had seen Clare win an All-Ireland 21 title in style in 2012, then win the senior in 13. They obviously won the 21 as well in 13. Looked like they were going to kind of take over the world. But yeah, like you said, Pat's never kind of crossed the senior level. And that's ultimately, I think, the context in which you look at this. You think of, I suppose if you look at it in kind of an isolation in the 2013 triumph or the 2011, it's kind of a clash of styles, and there's a lot of really impressive players on both teams. And Kilkenny come back with 2010 defeat, Clare come back in the middle of the 2013 championship. But as Michael has said, it's kind of framed by what that Kilkenny team went on to achieve. And by the next time that Clare really got to Croke Park and challenging in 2018, it was a vastly different Clare team. A lot of those, the older guys who kind of moved on, change of management. Okay, you still have, Tony Kelly was still a big part of it, and Podge was still playing well and all that. But I mean, it was guys like Aaron Shanahan, Jason McCarthy was getting the levelling point. It was different kind of guys, but before the team evolved and changed an awful lot.
But the criteria is that team from 2013 against that team in 2011. It isn't necessarily everything either side of it. So I think it's definitely worth keeping it just, a total focus on that team that year. What about the managers then, Finton? Because like Davy Fitz, obviously things didn't start out well. We've talked about that game against Cork in the Munster Championship. But this is a guy who had Patrick Donnellan sweeper against Galway, worked an absolute treat, completely ran Limerick off the road in the semi-final, although Limerick I think died under lights that day. Then in the All-Ireland final, the Shane O'Donnell trick absolutely worked a treat as well. He got everything right, whereas Brian Cody on the other side, he turns the ship around from the previous year, man marks Lara Corbett in the final, so he changes tack from 2010. So both managers actually have a lot of credit here.
Yeah, they do, absolutely. Like Davies is those kind of decisive master strokes, as you call them, as you would look at them. Like, I mean, you mentioned a good few of them. The obvious one is, the Shane O'Donnell one, the way he told them, the way he was told so late in the day on the Saturday, the way he'd identified that he was a guy that could come in and kind of do something. And even though then he used Derek Conan at the end of that game, he comes on and gets the fifth goal to kind of seal it. He just kind of really went for it in that game. But then Cody, it's just kind of, I suppose, a more kind of restorative job that he does over the course of the season. I mean, I know what you were saying about the league final, but I still think it's an impressive feat the way, it's two big finals. It's two finals that they've lost in Croke Park, and that they come back and they kind of reassert their dominance. But the quality of players that Cody had at his disposal then, though. I mean, that was when like TJ Reid wasn't starting. Richie Hogan, was that his kind of first All-Ireland final start? He gets a goal in it.
I think he might have started previously, but maybe have been injured or something like that. But yeah, your point is taken, yeah.
But like, you still had Eddie Brennan there and Shefflin and all that. They had a lot of the kind of the older stage of stars, but it was starting to become maybe, like Michael Fennelly was really, really asserting himself. I mean, that goal, when he kind of charges through the defence, it set the tone really. And then obviously the man-to-man thing that they did with Clare, because obviously it wasn't just the 2010 hat-trick with Clare. I mean, obviously that year's Munster final, he got 4 goals, wasn't it, against Waterford. So he really was the kind of the guy that all the coverage was about. So that, I suppose, that kind of man-to-man job. So yeah, they both kind of there's a lot of kind of credit for them. And again, that was the other thing about it, wasn't it, that afterwards it would have been like the Davy v Cody matchup, and instead we've had to wait for Davy to kind of go to Wexford to kind of see him regularly kind of go up against Cody. And obviously it's under kind of vastly different circumstances, so you didn't get the matchup on the pitch afterwards, and you didn't get it on the sideline afterward either with those counties or teams. And
you mentioned Michael Fennelly there. I'd like to see a matchup with him against maybe Colm Galvin, when the two of them are at the peak of their powers. Any matchup in particular stand out for you, Michael Verney? I mean, Henry Shefflin, maybe Brendan Bugler might go for him.
Yeah, Jackie on Podge Collins would have been interesting. Like, Podge Collins delivered a performance in the drawn match in the All-Ireland final that day. It was outrageous. He got that point, that kind of no-look point off the hurl underneath the Cusack stand, which was absolutely outrageous. Then, Tommy said he wanted Tony Kelly. It'd be interesting to see would he be let pick up Tony Kelly, who was playing kind of that deep line kind of centre forward role. Brian Hogan obviously would have been playing in 11 in that deep sitting centre back role too.
Can I make a point here? Because Tommy Walsh is a sort of wing back who always did a load of hurling himself. Probably stylistically, the last thing you want to do and put on Tony Kelly is someone who wants to do too much hurling themselves. And then you would imagine that Brian Hogan wouldn't be a natural fit for Tony Kelly either.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. Tommy would have hurled a load of ball, but if Tony Kelly hurls a load of ball, he gets 4 or 5 points. And Brian Hogan sitting back to protect the full back line would have meant that maybe Mick Fennelly was going to have to sit back maybe on Tony Kelly. So it would have been interesting. It would have been interesting to see if they'd maybe they'd put Jackie out on Tony Kelly like he did with maybe Lara and follow him around. You just don't know. That would have been very, very interesting. As you mentioned, Henry on Bugler or Henry on Conor Ryan at the time, who was probably playing the actual centre back role, whereas Pat Donlan maybe was sitting back sometimes, would have been very, very interesting as well. But the battle of the sideline would have been really the key one, and it's great to see that. We always wanted to see it, and we saw a bit with Waterford and Kilkenny, obviously. We didn't really get to see Clare and Kilkenny, apart from that big league semi-final in Thurles one day where Clare kind of gave Kilkenny a bit of a pace, and I think it was 16. But now we've got to see the rivalry that we always wanted. And I know that Brian Cody definitely respects Fitzy. He would have unbelievable respect for him, but he must see him as a fair annoyance now at this stage too, given that what he's done with Wexford. So it would have been nice to see another layer to this. Like, they could have met when Davy was over Waterford, when he was over Clare in Championship. They didn't, obviously, and then Wexford. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting rivalry, but there's some great matchups that could have taken place.
Okay, we'll all make our own call here. I can't look past that Kilkenny forward line, and even Michael Fennelly, hurler of the year at the time at midfield. Eddie Brennan, Richie Power, Henry Shefflin, Colm Fennelly, Larkin, Hogan, TJ Reid not even getting into the team. So I'm going to go with Kilkenny there. What do you think, Fintan?
Yeah, I'm going with Kilkenny as well. I mean, I was just thinking of it, if Cork scored 316 in 2 games against that Clare defence in 2013, and you would think, looking on paper, that Kilkenny forward line, Brennan, Power, Shefflin, Fennelly, Larkin, Hogan, and with TJ coming off the bench, that they would be able to put up a winning total. Yeah,
Michael, I presume you're going to go with Kilkenny.
Yeah, it would have been very interesting, because Davy definitely would have played the sweeper against Kilkenny, and a tactic that we have seen to really stifle Kilkenny in recent years, in particular, most notably with Wexford and even with Anthony Daly's Clare back in the day. So it would have been interesting, but I just think Kilkenny would have found a way. They might have struggled for periods and struggled to deal with the pace of Clare, but I just think they would have found a way. That team invariably did find a way. And as you say, that's a star-studded forward line. Very, very hard to see past them not being able to put up a 219, 220 total, which I think would have been enough to get the job done.
Okay, well, I'm going to put it out to a public vote on OurGame.ie, and we'll see who gets through to the next round.